thanks for the invitation to moderate this panel. So I'll ask the panel to come up. And so this session is, again, supposed to be from the user perspective of, in the era of AI, and also going towards the era of 6G, how does all that tie together with spectrum management? So this is going to be one of those sessions where I have to tie lots and lots of things together. You heard before lunch some of the presentations from Chris and Matt about how AI might change the network, either in terms of the applications or the compute, and also the connectivity and how that relates to, in Matt's case, spectrum management. And I'm going to try and go on that theme. If I could ask the panelists to come up and take seats. I've got a couple of minutes of intro that I just wanted to use to set the scene, and I'll probably steal someone's thunder, but you can complain about it afterwards or contradict me, so feel free. Before I'll be the lazy moderator and let the panel introduce themselves in a few minutes. It's much easier than me having to remember names, I always find. So first off, I'm an industry analyst and a commentator, and I cover a whole range of different things. So not just spectrum, mobile networks, Wi-Fi, fixed and fiber networks, bits of IoT, bits of cloud, some of the stuff you may have heard recently about network APIs is something I've covered for many years as well. And I tend to point out elephants in the room. And sometimes that makes people a little bit unhappy, and I'm sorry for that. But I think it's important sometimes to say the world as you see it, rather than the way people would like to see it. I work for myself, so I don't have a boss telling me what I can and can't say as well. So I think when we start talking about AI, 6G and spectrum management, I'm like, well, how do they all tie together? And the answer is in lots and lots of different ways. I'm not going to go through all of this, but there's a lot of things going on for AI that relate to the network. There's going to be AI for optimizing the radio network or wireless networks generally, as we heard from Matt. There'll be AI in the core networks about how you orchestrate, manage security things. There'll be AI for the customer, whether it's in the billing or customer care system of a telco, or in the management of Wi-Fi from the point of view of an enterprise as well. And then there's AI applications that we're using, which could be something basic like ChatGPT or Midjourney that created the image with a cat, which I'll explain in a moment, or whatever the next set of applications are. And there's some really interesting things when you start looking into what is AI doing today to networks. And the answer is not that much for the most part yet. Most of the impact of AI is inside data centers or between data centers. The amount that's on the access network, whether that's fixed or mobile, is relatively small. If we had this conference 4 years ago and you said, what would 200 million people be using? You might have said, oh, AR, VR, generating gigabytes of traffic every day. And instead we're doing 3 lines of text in the occasional image. So actually, arguably, it's reduced traffic compared to the forecast. 6G we'll talk about later on, and I know BB has got views on that. I've been doing a lot of work recently on what 6G could be and what it should be. I'll talk about it, but it clearly has implications from a spectrum point of view, whether that's shared, whether it's exclusive, unlicensed potentially, new bands, refarming, and so on. I'm a big fan of thinking of 6G as spectrum sharing native, which is a bit clunky, but relevant. And then AI has also implications on spectrum management. And we heard a bit about that this morning, but there's also AI for spectrum monitoring, potentially AI in advanced forms of network sharing, particularly with users that are incumbents that move around rather than are static, and also AI in regulation itself. Even at a basic level, just using AI to help fill in forms for applying for licenses. So a couple of things I'll note on that. On the bottom right, I had a report published last week by the Saudi regulator CST on some future ideas for spectrum sharing. And I think one of the things there I want to talk about, maybe touch with the panel, is a continuous cycle of spectrum platforms, whether that's the sensing, the databases, the receivers, marketplaces, and whether we can get an ongoing cadence of development and R&D cycles. And the last one, this picture of the cat. And here I'm going to sort of throw a bit of a ball into the usual discussion we have about exponential growth of mobile data traffic or data traffic. Imagine you have two options. You can download a cartoon, stream it, gigabytes, maybe 4 gigabytes for an hour of UHD traffic. Or perhaps in a year's time, a couple of years' time, you tell the gateway or your TV, smart TV, I want a 20-minute cartoon featuring a cat chasing a mouse around a kitchen with some kitchen utensils. And it goes and generates the cartoon on the fly in your house without creating any network traffic beyond the 100 bytes of text and maybe a couple of meg of images. So there's possibilities here for AI to actually reduce traffic as well as increase it. And this ties in with what Chris was saying of where is the compute. And I think of, rather than the continuum, I think of a dumbbell. This is what AI does to computing. You get a massive chunk of compute power, globally, maybe 100 to 200 gigawatts of power of compute in big and mid-sized data centers, and they're getting bigger. And at the other end, you've got billions of phones, hundreds of millions of laptops, tens of millions of cars, hundreds of millions of home gateways, various corporate and enterprise IoT devices, and they also have maybe collectively 100 gigawatts of compute. And the bit in the middle is actually quite slim. But I'll maybe come back, and if you think what that means for where the networks have to be, that has an interesting set of implications. Last one, and I will shut up for a moment, 6G. I see there's 3 philosophies or ideologies of 6G emerging. There's what I'll call, on the left, this is coming from the academia, from some of the vendors, and you'll hear lots of discussion of immersive this and virtual reality, extended reality, cyber physical systems, and lots of sort of new network technology, whether it's terahertz, whether it's underwater, I've heard. The Internet of Nanobio things was something I heard on one slide. And I sort of call that metaverse for dolphins. It's a great idea. It's a science project. Whether it's really important, we can discuss. At the other end, there is the cellular operators view of 6G, which essentially translates to as small a change from 5G as possible. We don't want to have to spend any more CapEx. If we can do it all in software, that's great. So I've characterized it as, what do we want? A small iteration from 5G. When do we want it? Not right now. And I think that the third view is what I would espouse, which is the maximum usefulness of 6G. What are the problems we want 6G to fix? So we want it to work everywhere. We want it to work ideally indoors, in rural areas, maybe at sea. We'd like it to be shareable, usable by enterprises, price points for emerging world as well as developed. And ideally, we'd like it to use less energy as well. And so I think that there's a philosophy of maximum usefulness. At that point, I'm going to shut up, and I'm going to turn over to our panelists. Not sure if we've got a slide with everyone's name on it. No, we don't. In that case, I'm definitely going to go the lazy approach. And BB, if you'd like to introduce yourself, I think hopefully we should have some slides up as well. If I press this, is this going to go to the next slide deck?
Yeah, we need to put the deck.
There you go. Excellent. Haven't got the conference monitor up. So.
This one is not changed. There you got my introduction. Right there. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Bharat Bhatia. I'm from India. IAFI is the ITU APT Foundation of India. And I do a lot of work in the ITU, in Working Party 5D particularly, as also in APT. Kondasan is here, and I see many of my colleagues from different parts of the world, and great to see everybody. So I'm just going to take 5 minutes, and that talk about a little bit about 2 of your problem areas, the 6G and the spectrum. So let's talk about 6G, and we are talking of the users, basically, the users' needs. In ITU, we call them user scenarios. So in ITU Working Party 5D, we worked a lot, at least 2 years continuously, to develop a vision for 6G. It's no more called vision, it's called framework, because the vision term was not acceptable to some people. So now we have the official framework for 6G. We call it IMT 2030. That's the official ITU name for 6G. And to my understanding, and I think most people agree, that this frame is now the global dominant and almost de facto standard for 6G reference point. So this provides exactly what 6G is supposed to do. It has both the things. As you mentioned, the operators don't want the changes, operators want minimum. So the three of the usage scenarios are same as what were in the 5G. So effectively continuing from the eMBB, it goes on to immersive communication, which in some extent slightly up from there. The MMTC, remember in the 5G era, we now call it massive communications, almost similar. It's a massive Internet of Things. And the URLLC, which was in the 5G, now becomes HRLLC, next iteration. So all those three are almost further up from 5G. But that's not all in 6G. The users want more, and it's very right for users to demand not just those three things, but some more things. And many of the countries in ITU discussions fought for it that there should be much more than these three, which was the operator's typical format. So three things that have been added here. One, to satisfy the AI community. So there is integrated AI in communications. Second, to satisfy the ubiquitous community. Many countries, smaller countries, developing countries, wanted the ubiquitous connectivity to be a main thing. The ubiquitous connectivity is the fourth pillar, or fourth user scenarios. And there's a lot of talk about the sensing. Integrated sensing and communication is the sixth and the final. So those are the 6 user scenarios, which combines 3 from the previous one and 3 new ones. And when we put them all together, the next job that we are doing in the ITU right now is defining how do we measure those parameters. The first 3 are very easy to measure. How much should be data rate, how much should be latency, and how much should be the massive connectivity, or how many devices you can fit in a square meter or square kilometer. But the new ones are not that easy. They are very, very difficult. They're very, very challenging. How do you measure ubiquitous connectivity? How do you measure integrated AI? And how do you measure integrated sensing, haptics, and all of those good? So this is something that ITUR Working Party 5D, where I chair one of the working groups, has started working on. We call them TPRs, technical performance requirements. Those TPRs are being defined right now, and hopefully by end of the year or maybe early part of next year, we would have defined those. And then we will go into the evaluation process to select what is officially the 6G candidate technologies. So that's all about, and there'll be a lot about spectrum in that. There'll be a lot about sharing. Let me talk to spectrum now. Many of us who were in WRC 23 in Dubai, great place and great food and everything, but no decision on 6 gigahertz. 6 gigahertz continue to drive everybody crazy. We spent hours and hours and days and days. I remember the night when I left from the meeting room at 4 a.m. and was back at 6 a.m. Those were the days we were not able to agree on what 6 gigahertz is going to do. But effectively what's happening today around the world, the lower 6 gigahertz band is almost universally accepted for Wi-Fi. Almost, I say, because still many countries have undecided. India being my country, one of those, still undecided. Some mobile operators still want that band also for IMT, which I think is not the right thing to do. But yes, that discussion is still going on. But mostly, I think it is a globally harmonized band for Wi-Fi. But there's a lot of discussions on the AFC. How do you make it outside? How do you use the Wi-Fi outside? And AFC discussions will start. In the APT, we just started the work on a new AFC report. We completed the work on the Wi-Fi report, but now started the work on the AFC report. And hopefully in the next 2 meetings, we would have a way forward, at least in the Asia Pacific, what is the way forward on the AFC. The upper 6 GHz band continues to be a challenge. Some bigger countries have already opened it for Wi-Fi. Many countries have still not decided. And there is continuing lobbying from GSMA and operators that that band is actually a mobile band and should be only for mobile band. There is still discussion of how the sharing can take place, and I'm sure other speakers will talk about that. But when we talk about just 6G, there are new bands being explored, particularly from 4 to 15 gigahertz. That is a range. We have agenda item 1.7 for WRC 27, and that is where discussions have started. Studies are ongoing in various bands from starting from 4 right up to 15.35 gigahertz. And we assume there'll be at least some bands that will identify it. And that's where the sharing will play a very important role, because many of these bands have incumbents, cannot be used straight away. So great that DSA is here, that we will have some sharing studies, we'll have some sharing possibilities of those bands. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll get out of the way. I was just trying to avoid elbowing people while they were speaking the stage. So thank you very much for that. And one quick one. Given it's we're talking here about user requirements, is there ever any discussion in the meetings you've been at on the requirements of, well, where we are now, indoors versus outdoors? Does that crop up in discussions?
Indoor versus outdoor is a discussion not so much in 5D, it's mostly in 5A, where we talk about Wi-Fi and those technologies. And I'm sure in 5D also we should be talking about, there were some, while we were formulating these user scenarios, there was some talk about indoor, but not so much.
Okay, yeah, it's a pet topic of mine, so I always... Next up, I'd like to invite Konda-san to come to the stage. And yes, I've got the presentations in the right order. I'll move this chair out of the way.
Konda-san.
Okay, thank you, Dean, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Masanori Kondo, and the Secretary General of Asia Pacific Telecommunity, APT. So today, my presentation is talk about spectrum for growth, leveraging AI and 6G to drive national development. With this title, actually, I would like to provide not the kind of explanation or answers, but rather food for thought for your consideration. And as an APT Secretary General, I would like to provide the elements what I usually receive from our members, Asia Pacific APT's members. Asia Pacific APT consists of 38 member countries covering from Iran to eastbound to north to Mongolia, which is the only region 1 country in APT, and down to Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Islands. So as you see, we have big countries like China or India in terms of population, and small country, Pacific country, which has less than 10,000 population, some of them. So as you can easily see, APT is so diverse region, and the opinions and the comments towards spectrum allocation and sharing spectrum and so on are quite different and diverse. So today I prepare 2 slides, as I said, to introduce the comments or views from especially developing countries, what they think or what kind of questions they may pose to the APT discussion platform. First is the connectivity. So spectrum management is, of course, it is a very important factor of in terms of national ICT strategy when they talk about spectrum management. And when they consider such national ICT strategy, of course, they need to consider industry development, industry efficiency, as well as socio-economic growth, and so on. And when they talk about spectrum, there are 2 limitation or restrictions or constraints. One is spectrum is a limited resource. And second one is how to expand connectivity to underserved and rural areas. So those are the kind of policy issues for policymakers. So consider you are the policymakers or let's say Ministry of ICT. What kind of topics or policy issues need to be considered? So simply I put the question, kind of overall summarize of the question I received. How can policymakers in developing countries create spectrum management strategy that prioritize equitable access to connectivity and foster economic development? So when we discuss AI or 6G or sharing spectrum, we need to, or policymakers or regulators needs to consider connectivity for all. And the second point is the spectrum sharing in the AI era. Then as Joanna from ITU mentioned, and I just mentioned, spectrum is limited and also demand is increasing. So the point is, to what extent we can provide affordable connectivities to everyone. Then spectrum sharing can reduce barriers for entering markets and fostering competition and encouraging investment in rural and low-income regions. So if you are policymakers, you have to think the situation from those aspects, connectivity, and if there's a connectivity, whether it is affordable or not. So the simple question was summarized question is, what are the challenges and opportunities for developing countries in implementing spectrum sharing, and how can partnerships with the private and private sectors help extend connectivity to underserved areas? So here the question, of course, includes to what extent affordability can be achieved. So third and fourth, this is the second and last slide. And the third point is that technological innovations. So of course, spectrum sharing is a general concept itself. So conceptually, it may be applicable for any spectrum bandwidths, but it may not be practical to apply for all existing and potential services. So policymakers need to understand the environment where spectrum sharing is practical. And also when we talk about spectrum sharing, then also today's topic includes AI, then spectrum sharing without AI and spectrum sharing with AI. What could be the difference of these ideas or concept? So is it simply a matter of efficiency or providing something new dimensions? What are the fundamental elements to make it practical? So I think this is a point in line with what Cisco made a presentation this morning. And fourth and the last point is that path to 6G. So here, policymakers must prepare for 6G by implementing forward-thinking policies that balance innovation, inclusivity, and affordability. But for that, of course, international cooperation and harmonization of spectrum usage are essential to ensure cross-border connectivity and economic opportunities, especially if we talk about sharing. Of course, when we talk about sharing, it is not technical issue, but also regulatory issues as well. If regulatory framework is not harmonized sufficiently enough to have sharing across the border, then the market size will be just limited in your country. So in that sense, sharing practice, in order to avoid sharing practice to be fragmented, I think it is very important to harmonize and collaborate internationally, regionally and internationally. So again, this is a food for thought, and I hope that this kind of questions I receive from our members, especially from developing countries, will contribute for your insightful consultation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just a quick question. You know, of the various countries in APT region, do you see a real diversity of expertise in spectrum sharing today? Are some very much far down the path and others are still at the beginning of the journey?
Yes, we do very much. So that's why as APT, we provide capacity building programs specifically for spectrum management. So of course, spectrum management is not only like sharing and so on, but when we talk about sharing, it's kind of one package. Monitoring is also important. Yeah. So we provide the capacity building as a whole for spectrum management field, and if based on the requirements, we provide the specific topics such as sharing and monitoring.
Thank you. Come back to some of that in the panel session. I'd like to introduce our third speaker as Mercedes Aramendia, I believe,
yes.
From Uruguay.
Thank you very much.
And I think you should have your slides already on there.
Right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks, DCA, Marta, and all the team to give me the opportunity to come, and also all of you, because you are here, and now is the nap time, so it's hard for us, and of course for you. And also, I'm really glad to have the opportunity to listen to different experts during the morning. The truth is, all of this for me has been really wonderful to listen new ways to use technology, all the challenges that we have, and important to work all together in order to provide new solutions to users. I'm Mercedes Aramendia. I'm from Uruguay. I'm the regulator. I'm from URSEC. Nowadays, in Uruguay, we have 4G in more than 94% of the society and the population. 3G, more than 95% of the population, and also 5G is in the capital cities of our country. Also, we have more FTTH in more of the 95% of the places and houses and homes. But also, we know that we have a lot of challenges related to what will come, and also with the usability of services. When I started to prepare this topic, the truth is that I had a great surprise related with all that we can do with AI. In Uruguay, we have a specific agency that is one that is working with AI, and from URSEC, we do some things together, especially in everything related to the digital agenda. But the truth is that in this way, to see how AI will help to improve and to optimize the way that networks and telecom services are being provided, it's completely new and very, very interesting. So I'm really thanks with all of you. And when I start to prepare all things, I start to think what the users need, what they want. So I think that nowadays we all want hyper-personalized services. We are now used to open different platforms and easily access to content tailored to our preference, and that's because of the AI analysis. Also, I think that nowadays we want everything in real time, everything immediately. And people expect their needs and requests to be met instantly, without delays. Third, we all want ubiquitous connectivity. It doesn't matter where you are or how or who will provide our services, since the conditions and the quality were reasonable. Users want to be connected everywhere. And in addition of this, I think that it's important to remark that users need and want security, privacy, resilience, reliability, and sustainability. Now, I want to talk about some applications of 6G technology. Some of them we already are a reality in 5G, but we think that with 6G, we'll go deeper in the usability. One is the accelerating digital transformation across industries. The evolution of ultra-reliable, low-latency communication will support critical machine-to-machine operations. Some examples include smart healthcare, dynamic monitoring, telediagnostics, analysis how disease is spread, recovery training, and even remote surgery. Secondly, logistics, using drones to deliver goods or manage transport system more efficiently. Third, industry, for example, to improve the assembly lines, mass production, transportation, and more. Autonomous vehicles. These are widely used in sectors like mining, construction, and agriculture, but often operated remotely. But however, to go to level 5 of autonomous vehicles, that will redefine the way we think about traveling by car. And lastly, sensing technologies. These enable high accuracy to localization, tracking, and mapping, along with augmented human sense to recognize activity and gesture. Second use case is immersive experience. Extended reality, which include augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality, allow us to feel as if we were in another place. With higher resolution and video frame rate, we will push the limits of human perception, and with multisensory communication, we will also become possible to allow us to exchange in real-time information related to touch, vibration, force, taste, sight, and more. And finally, AI will make everything smarter. For example, in network automation, native AI will help analyze service and traffic, optimize communication and computing resources, and dynamically manage network accordingly to demand. Also, data processing, of course, not all raw data is usable or high quality, so AI will process it efficiently to reduce complexity and save energy. Of course, for all of these usable, to make them universal, we need larger capacity, high availability, and greater data concentration, also faster speeds and higher peak data rates, lower latency, enhanced user experience in the data transmission, and of course, robust infrastructure and spectrum. We need to harmonize it, we need to coordinate it, and also we need economies of scale. We have a lot of challenges and also opportunities. While we already have access to some advanced solutions, 6G will be essential for pushing these technologies further. Current network provides impressive services, but as we move into a more connected, data-heavy future, 6G will be needed to handle the increasing demands. Challenges, we have a lot, of course, but just to mention some, we need to use efficiently the resources. Expanding, optimizing infrastructure is crucial. We need equitable access for all. 6G must be universal, ensuring the digital divide closes, meet user expectation and demand, instant access to information and services regardless of location, new ways of interaction. 6G will support interfaces like mind control devices and integration with generative AI and spectrum sharing. I think that is something that it will be growing on demand, and maybe 6G will require dynamic spectrum sharing techniques and advanced AI algorithm. Maybe can manage spectrum use in real time, minimizing interference and optimizing available frequencies. Opportunities, I think that is very good that we will be able to adapt to make adaptive bandwidth, the possibility to dynamically adjust bandwidth in real time, prioritizing low latency, high data application, it would be disruptive. And also data compression and optimization will allow more efficient transmission without sacrificing quality. Last, AI-driven network optimization can optimize traffic by analyzing usage patterns and allocating resources where they need it most, avoiding congestion and improving overall efficiency. I think that 6G will not just improve what we have, it will enable new possibilities and smarter use of resources. It will push innovation, allowing us to attend people's needs, protecting privacy, security, and connecting for all, leaving no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we're going to go straight on to, thank you very much, Ms. Hayes, for that. I'm going to go straight on to the last speaker so we can open it up. Chris, over to you.
So thank you very much, Dean. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here and talk to you today. My name's Chris Walford. A couple of people have asked me, I do still work at Ofcom, but I am here in my capacity as chairman of the ECC within CEPT, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing within CEPT. So CEPT has huge amounts of technical and policy expertise on spectrum issues in Europe. That comes from our 46 administration members who contribute actively to our work, but also from the industry participation. And that stakeholder input, particularly at the technical level, is invaluable in terms of helping CEPT to develop its outputs, our reports, our recommendations, our decisions. This is all done under the umbrella of a strategic plan, and we develop a strategic plan approximately every 5 years within the CEPT and within ECC. And I went back to look at the last one, which was actually developed back in 2020 to 2025 period, so we developed it back in 2020. And in that, we very much set out the focus on enabling more efficient use of spectrum in order to address spectrum scarcity. And there's a clear recognition that spectrum sharing is a key aspect of that. We need to be much more innovative in terms of how we make spectrum available. We need to take advantage of new technologies, things like cognitive approaches, databases, AI is specifically mentioned, and also a recognition how licensing frameworks are going to need to evolve. And within that strategic plan, we actually identified 3 principles relating to spectrum. And those 3 principles were, first of all, spectrum sharing. The role that spectrum sharing can play to promote that more efficient use of spectrum. The need to cover both licensed and license exempt or unlicensed use of spectrum. And also a recognition of the need to do better in terms of some of our compatibility and our coexistence analysis, some of the models that underpin how we do that coexistence analysis and how we can effectively fit users in more tightly to enable spectrum sharing. A second aspect is around, that was identified as a key principle out of the 3, was around transmitter and receiver parameters. There's a lot of focus always on transmitters when it comes to spectrum management. People think about the performance of transmitters, that's the core of spectrum. But equally important is the receiver side of things. A real recognition if we're going to use spectrum more efficiently, then we need to focus on having better receivers. And I'll come on to that in just a moment. And then finally, a recognition of the need to balance the interests of all spectrum users. And this is just becoming increasingly complex for spectrum managers. There are more and more users out there, different types of application, and more demand for access to spectrum. So balancing those interests, ranging from incumbents that typically want stability, that want things to stay the same, to all the way through to new entrants that will quite often be just looking for ways to rapidly access new spectrum bands, and just trying to find that balance is key. So that's sort of the core of what we're aiming to do. In terms of what have we actually done on spectrum sharing? Well, I said I'd come back to receivers. And in May of this year, we published a recommendation on receiver resilience. And this has been a hugely complex and contentious piece of work over the past couple of years, working very closely with our industry colleagues in relation to the development of this recommendation. And it essentially sets out receiver resilience to transmissions in adjacent bands. And that's a recommendation that needs to be taken into account by CEPT in taking forward our work, but also by ETSI in the development of harmonized standards. As I say, it's been a huge amount of work, and it is essentially, I think, a sort of a world first in terms of really trying to focus on the role that receivers can play in promoting efficient use of spectrum and actually coming out with a recommendation in that field. Second area, which has already been touched on earlier today, Gerasimos mentioned the work on 3.8 to 4.2. This has been a huge amount of work, again, within ECC over the past couple of years. We went out to public consultation a few months ago. The hope is that we can agree this CPT report, which, as I say, is opening up the 3.8 to 4.2 gigahertz band for low and medium power use cases. Excuse me. And therefore enabling that for industry verticals, lots of users on a shared basis for those low and medium use cases. So that really is putting spectrum sharing into practice. And as I say, we're hopeful that we can agree that in, or the plan is to agree that in November at the ECC. And then finally, I can't give a presentation here without mentioning the upper 6 gigahertz band. It really is the flavor of the month, the year, the decade, whatever. We have 2 reports that are currently underway. Excuse me again. Within ECC. One looking at sharing between incumbent services and RLANs. The other looking at sharing between RLANs and IMT in the band. Fair to say these have both been very contentious, particularly the second one. The work is currently underway. We're hoping the reports can be developed, hopefully in the early-ish part of next year. But I know there is still a huge amount of work to be done on those. We have also been promised a mandate by the European Commission in relation to this band. So there's going to be a lot of activity in relation to the upper 6 gigahertz band over the coming months, and I suspect over the coming year or so as well. But do watch this space for hopefully those ECC reports next year. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. All right, well, we started the panel late, so I'm not quite sure how long we've got for the Q&A, but I'm going to dive straight in. I'm going to be contentious. 5G has been a bit of a disappointment so far. Actually, it's not that contentious, everyone can say. And yet we're only halfway through and we're talking about 5G advanced and so on. So given there doesn't appear to be much user demand for anything special that 5G does, how can we have a session on user demand for 6G? Is it to fix the problems, or is it because we've got a whole bunch of other things that people won't want in 5 years' time or 10 years' time? Who wants to take that? Phoebe, come on.
Yeah. A lot of people are saying that 6G, actually 5G is doing what 6G is supposed to do. Many things which we envisage in 6G are actually being done right now in 5G. So do we really need 6G? But then there are others who really want that there should be a new generation. It's like a fashion. Every 6-7 years, we must have a new generation. So 6G will come.
Although, yeah, for MMTC, we're still using 4G technology for that rather than, anyway.
Even for private networks, we still use 4G quite a lot. But 5G is still coming in a big way in that.
Anyone else want to take the question? Mercedes, go for it.
Thank you. I think that this part of the process that we have to continue the stage. And also, I think that, for example, in 3G, we were focused on voice, then on 4G, we focus on data, in 5G, we're focused on IoT and industries. And I think that in 6G, we'll go deeper and we'll go to Internet of Things and immersive experience and different users cases.
I'm going to ask you the question then. So are enterprises and IoT using 5G in Uruguay at the moment? Because they're not in most of the world.
In Uruguay, we already started to use some use cases, for example, immersive experience. But the truth is that we don't have enough use cases or reason to use it. For example, I have a metaverse at home, but I use it just, I don't know, maybe someday if I'm by myself with no kids to see a movie, but it's really strange. I prefer to do it in my TV, my television.
And you're connected with Wi-Fi or USB?
With fiber optic, for example.
Wi-Fi.
At home.
Yeah, because most of the headsets use Wi-Fi or USB.
Yes, but the issue is if once, For example, I live in an apartment. Once all my neighbors will be connected in the Wi-Fi, if we will have enough broadband or not. So then we will have that challenge. And also it depends if we will have Wi-Fi in that place or not, or if you need, or if you have wireless.
Understand. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think from my point of view, if you just cut now as a dimension, you can see both 5G and 6G. But actually, what we have, you could have asked the same question 10 years ago, while we have 4G, why we talk about 5G. So in that sense, 5G has a certain length, or as well as 6G, we have to start to discuss, because we have to be prepared for AI is agenda item in this case, agenda item for the 27th and 31st. So in that sense, I think the discussion itself happening now should be in parallel.
Fair enough. Chris?
So I was going to come at it from a slightly different perspective, and I was going to say that I think we should get away from talking about Gs. I mean, I don't think that your average consumer cares whether it's 4G, 5G, 6G, Wi-Fi, or whatever. What they want is faster speeds, better connectivity, reliable service, and security. And I think in some ways, I mean, you mentioned the indoor point earlier. I think it's much more important in some ways to think about where people are actually using the data and the best way of getting the service, which is going to be reliable, fast, better faster speeds, etc., etc. I'm quite, as I say, whatever G it is, I'm not sure it really matters.
I promise I haven't set this up, because I was about to say, if we're not quite sure exactly what 6G is going to offer users, what the demand is going to be, but we can look at 5G and actually all the things we talked about with 5G, like immersive VR, and most AR is indoors. Most healthcare, apart from road crash, is indoors. Most education, indoors. Manufacturing, indoors. All of the things that we talked about as being 5G use cases that we thought were cool and new are in exactly the places where we often don't have 5G coverage, and where spectrum like millimeter wave is useless from outdoors to in. Does this not mean that when we start talking about spectrum for 6G, it's worth thinking, as Chris said, where it's going to be used, as well as who's going to be using it? And then doesn't that then drive discussion about what sort of spectrum we might want and how we might manage it? I'm going to tee that one up. Thanks, Chris.
So the spectrum debates are very complicated. So
I know.
it's whether, and I like what Chris said, actually. Everything that we need is basically a fiber network with an access network at the end.
Yes.
It doesn't really matter what that access network is. You need to reach there and then finally distribute that to you. For me, actually, Wi-Fi works much better most of the times. At least 90% time I am on Wi-Fi. It's only 10% when outside my home, driving in my car, that I use 6G. But today, if you look at the spectrum discussions, 90% spectrum discussion is about 6G. Wi-Fi spectrum discussion, very limited. And I think we need to reverse that.
Understand.
Okay,
I realize
so
you have to have the political debate.
Yeah,
here.
okay. So my personal opinion is that suppose you have a car, but the percentage of your usage is less than 10%, right? So in that sense, but you need car. So while Wi-Fi covers 90%, still I think we need mobile connectivity. The point is seamless, how we can combine those two different networks.
I think also that it's, of course, it doesn't matter the name, but I think that it's part of the process and the time that you need to do research and develop, because of course, from when you start to develop one technology, you have a period of time, a necessary period of time that you start to do research, to develop, to do trial, etc. So I think that you need that time, and also you need to coordinate worldwide. So, and it's really hard to do a worldwide coordination. Also you need a lot of agreements, and also you need to do trials to be clear, to be sure that you are not going to generate harmful interference. and also you need economies of scale. So I think there are a lot of different things that you have to work, that are involved, and you have to work on. And also you have different people and different actors of the ecosystem that have to work and have to harmonize and to coordinate. And you need, for example, academia, you need the industry, you need the government, you need regulators, you need a lot of different actors of the ecosystem that they have to work. And I think that's why we use in 2023 WRC, we state that we are going to start to work in some spectrum, and now during this 4 years we'll be analyzing and working and studying and doing a lot of research, and then in 2027 we will meet together again and continue making analysis. So I think that is part of the mature process that we need.
I would agree with that, and I actually want to sort of follow up on.
I just want to add one comment to this discussion. Let's not forget the satellites or NTNs.
Actually, yeah, no one's mentioned satellite at all.
That's something which is going to come in a big way and could actually convert a lot of things that we are talking about today. As the NGSO satellites and bigger ones, Amazon, et cetera, they start rolling in, you might see the mobility being covered by some of those, and the equations might change.
And I mean, do we also see satellite as a good example? We heard about enterprise. Do we make the assumption that 6G is driven by the mobile operators, the MNOs, or do we start with the assumption that 6G should be democratized, and it could be MNOs, it could be enterprises, could be governments, could be individuals? Yeah, or do we go in baking in the assumption of sort of IMT is usually framed in the frame of services rather than infrastructure?
So building on the last point, I mean, I think there's a couple of fundamental points you can make, which mentioned earlier, that mobile will continue to grow and demand for spectrum, Wi-Fi will continue to grow, demand for spectrum, etc. Satellites, clearly, huge potential there. What I think we need to, and Mercedes has done a really good job of sort of setting out some of the issues that need to be resolved. I think what we need to do, though, going forward, is think about those problems and how we solve them, not necessarily how we've done it in the past, but we need to move forward into a different way of thinking when it comes to spectrum. I think it has been quite siloed in the past. You tend to think, oh, what's the solution for mobile? What's the solution for Wi-Fi? What's the solution for satellite? In answer to your question, I think it would be a mistake to carry on in the same way. I think we need to actually have a much more embraced spectrum policy that deals with all of those things as a whole and actually comes out with a coherent solution.
So in other words, actually, user-centric.
Yeah.
And where a user could be an individual with a phone, it could be a company with a robot, it could be the application developer as a user class, or a government, and so on.
Also, I think that we should start to use AI to make more tailored solutions.
That's a really interesting one, and yeah, I would agree. Does that mean we need less harmonization in future? Because we could actually have, everyone's always said, oh, we can't have fragmentation. But couldn't you just have a layer of AI, and the AI deals with the fragmentation? Yeah, and as long as you've got enough scale, so you don't want to have 10 or 100 versions of 6G. We could probably live with 2 or 3, and AI masking it from everyone.
I think that's an interesting question. I think harmonization will continue to be important, quite frankly. I mean, I think, what you need to do is you need to be able to provide the manufacturers with the certainties they can get the economies of scale. And I don't know to the extent that sort of AI can address that. I mean, if it can, then great. But I think you must be careful not to throw out the baby with the bathwater and sort of take this to the other extreme, because if you lose those economies of scale and things like that, it's going to be consumers that will suffer.
I think economies of scale and harmonization is going to continue and must continue. That's something very, very important. But let's not forget that the places where we discuss the 6G or 5G, we don't see people like this participate. And maybe that's something very important. We need more and more people from the other side to start participating in 5G and those discussions. And that's what I think is missing.
In my case, for example, in Uruguay, we are a small country between 2 very big countries. So for us, harmonization is essential, and also economy of scales, because we have common sense, and we know that once the developers or companies, etc., at the time they have to buy equipment and devices, they do it regionally. So if we not consider what is going on with our neighbors, then accessibility and accessibility is going to be can be affected. So we have to consider economies of scale, and harmonization for us is very, very important.
Okay, that's fair enough. Actually, one thing I'm very aware of is we've got lots of people with spectrum regulation experience at the stage. As far as I know, no one does AI regulation. But you do?
In Uruguay, we start to work in a national strategy of AI regulation, and also there is a special agency that already sent to the parliament some recommendation and principles, to ethics principles, focus on what to do with AI. And of course, I think that it's very important to start to integrate AI with 6G and also with other technologies as IoT, big data. There's a lot of different technology that I think that we have to start to integrate everything, as well as the different ways to connect people, because I think that for people, important is to be connected. There doesn't matter the way that they are connected. They want to have good connection, quality connection, everywhere they are, and quality, privacy, security, etc.
Yeah, for the Asia Pacific region, there is no so-called AI regulation, but members want to have like a vision. For instance, G7 has an AI vision, G20 has an AI vision, OECD has an AI vision. I mean, maybe the different name is a bit different, but they have certain direction to what extent, or what kind of principles should be implemented when they consider AI applications.
I mean, I certainly think that AI for spectrum management is an area which is interesting, and I've certainly seen a few people with suggestions for doing AI spectrum monitoring, where you look for anomalies and things like that. We've started a bit late, and we're probably going to finish fairly soon. So I'm going to throw it open to the floor and say, does anyone have any questions, comments, feedback? I see a couple of questions over there, one from Mr. Zemansky and one from South Africa, our South African friend. Paul, I believe. Right.
Yeah. Dean, you asked the question, you said, look, 5G has been somewhat of a disaster. I would go further than that, but that's not the point of my question. And I agree totally with Chris that we probably need to abolish the G model. Yeah? And the reason being 2G to 3G was major, 3G to 4G LTE was major. And then suddenly 5G came along and it was a failure, it was a disaster. And it tarnished. Then this is the question I want to ask. I mean, after sort of the end of the Second World War, no one was calling their children Adolf anymore because the name was tarnished. How much do you think that 5G has tarnished the name of the Gs, that you're now sitting there and trying to sell 6G? Right. Wouldn't it be far better to forget the Gs and hide it away? No, it's nothing at all to do with that. It's not an advancement of 5G because it's too tarnished.
I think I call it a disappointment rather than disaster, but there you go. Right, so should we call it 6H then?
At least in Uruguay we don't regulate technology, so supposedly we are not regulating by technology, but for us it's a way to do part of the process. How to explain to society, for example, and to parliaments and governments, etc.
I'd come back to most consumers. I'm not sure it has been a disaster. I'm not sure that most consumers care. Quite frankly, if you speak to someone in the street, all they want is just a better level of service, faster, more reliable. They'll be more concerned about the security side of things than they would about whether it's 5G or 6G or Wi-Fi. Yeah, I mean, as has been spoken about earlier, that seamless connectivity, I think, is absolutely pivotal. They don't want to be sort of putting in passwords and things when they enter into a building to switch between networks and stuff. So, assuming you can address all those things, I think the disappointment of a particular G will soon be forgotten. I don't think that's a...
Yeah, I think some of the shareholders in some of the vendors probably regret it, and I think some politicians who perhaps we're a little bit over enthusiastic about it, maybe. I think that, yeah, I agree. The average person, they're not, they might turn around and say, oh, well, is that it? But I don't think that it's going to, I don't think they're going to change their vote on it.
But there's a group of people which still says 5G is successful, it's great success. It's all a question of your point of view.
And depends
So
which
there are many
country.
people, which point of view, many people will say, oh, 5G is a great success. So it's a question of your own perception.
Chris, we'll move on. I can see another question in the back of the room as well.
So first of all, I think it was a fascinating panel. I found myself agreeing with Chris a lot, which concerned me. But if you think about innovation, most of the time for the most profitable companies in the world, it's incremental. It's not groundbreaking, and then you can extract a lot of value. And I think part of the problem here, when you talk about 5G, is it didn't really enable new mass market use cases. We're talking about verticals, and it is very hard to monetize a product with that sort of expense for verticals. Everybody loves verticals, but you can't make money in verticals like that. You've got to have a core mass market. And so for 6G, they've got to figure out some way to mass market, period. Otherwise, it's not going to be profitable. And at least from my perspective, governments can't make the market. We're hoping, or shape the market, but we hope that they enable the market. So I'm hoping the discussions that come to 6G spectrum are, does this fit the price point for my country? Is this widget going to go into this thing? And is someone going to pay for the service? Because if you can't answer that question, probably not a good direction to go in.
Thank you. Before I find out to the panel, one quick question around the room. Who believes that 6G is all about sub-terahertz? Put your hand up. Terahertz.
What's
Yeah. Right. I think we can go, if you come back 2 years ago about 6G, it's going to be 300 gigahertz and above up to terahertz. No. Right. I'm glad we got that one settled. Right. So coming back to take one last question, and then I'll go ask the panel to sum up with responses to Chris and
Thomas Smith from Wireless Connect. We're a small ISP in Ireland. One of the things, just to comment on the harmonization, I think harmonization in Europe is absolutely key for economies of scale. Making an observation as a 5G user and a Wi-Fi user, I would say that 5G or any of the Gs were the promise that are delivered by the few for the many, and Wi-Fi is actually a promise or a gift that can be purchased by anyone, deployed by anyone, and the deployment statistics speak for themselves, I think.
I'm not sure there's a question there, but I think with that, and also with Chris's comment, I think I'm just going to go along the panel and ask everyone to sum up. I'm going to start with Condorcet at the end and work my way this way around.
Oh, okay. So summarize. I think I personally enjoyed the panel discussion and today's this morning's introduction and panels as well. So once again, from my point of view, I'd like to share my view that I think the voices of developing countries should be heard, and also those people in that country. So here we talked about the very kind of high-end technology and services, which is it's happening somewhere in the world, but other parts, they are still suffering, not suffering, still trying to deploy 4G or 5G or 4G. So in that sense, but at the same time, they are willing to learn from this industry trend. So in that sense, it's not like a summary of this session, but I would like to share such kind of observations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Chris, any last words?
Well, I'm slightly concerned that this panel took a slightly sort of negative turn in the way of sort of, on 5G and what have you. And I mean, I always say it's a bit more upbeat. I mean, this is still the device or whatever that it's an extraordinary device that consumers just wouldn't do without. And the way in which this transforms lives over the last 20 years and connectivity generally over the last 20 years, what that has achieved is phenomenal. And I think the future holds even more amazing prospects, including things like AI. The one thing I would say is that I do think we need to think differently about how we address some of these problems of the future. utilising new technologies and not just look to what we've done in the past to solve them.
Thank you. Mercedes.
Okay, I think that we need to start to think in a different way. I think if we want to make we have a sustainable development in the market, and also the way we use technology, the ways we develop telecommunication, the way we save energy. I think we have to start to have more coordination, more dialogue, and try to work together between the different actors of the ecosystem. I think that that's the best way to find economics of scales.
Thank you very much. And Bibi.
Yeah, so I like my device. I think this is something which practically everybody in the world today carries. And I think we all want it to remain connected always. Wherever I am, whether in the air or on the ground or wherever. So I think the main thing is whether Wi-Fi or 6G or 5G or NG. But in ITU, on the lighter side, we stopped using the G terms. We don't talk about G at all. We only call IMT, no Gs.
No G.
It may still mean the same thing, but yes. But I think the main thing is the user wants to remain connected in the most efficient and most cost-effective manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. One last thing I think, from a spectrum sharing point of view, there's unfortunately two uses of the term spectrum sharing. One is what we talk about as DSA, but the other is what's called dynamic spectrum sharing, the 3GPP technology. Switzerland, where we are now, is the preeminent example of using existing 4G spectrum for 5G and sharing in the band, which is probably why I've got a 5G logo on my phone and 1 megabit a second of uplink at the moment. And on that, I will thank the panel and hand over to Martha. And I'm not sure if we go for a coffee break or if we go straight to the next panel. But thank you very much. Oh, apparently there's a photo coming up. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Martha.